Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity One-on-One with Larry and Joe.
All right. So Larry and I were talking, and we decided this would be our final podcast episode. But the story doesn't end here. We feel like YouTube is going to be a better format for our discussions going forward because we really want to really transition to more kind of hands-on training, which you really can't do in an audio only format. So we actually just recorded our first YouTube, which we'll put a link in the show notes so that, people can go on the channel and, hit that subscribe button, right? and that way, when we post new shows, on YouTube, people can actually see not only Larry and I talking, but more importantly, like the screens, like, hands-on training. So we plan to really kind of just continue these conversations over there. So this is our 22nd episode. We started back on January of 2020. So here we are, Larry, 2.5 years later.
My goodness.
Right?
That's a long time. Yeah.
So looking back, why don't you give us a summary of kind of what you've done over these last 2.5 years in terms of study and employment? Like what's kind of a summary of that and kind of where you are now?
Okay. Wow. 2.5 years. When I first started, I didn't know anything I thought I knew about computers at all. Everyone, they're so easy, and it's so much more to it. So yeah, in my studies now, I am studying to be a cybersecurity engineer. So I'm in the CASP class, which is a little advanced class. It's more for management and stuff like that. It's real fun. It's heavy, but it's fun. And wow, 2.5 years. I mean, I didn't even, if you did ask me 2.5 years ago, hey, what's a CPU? I wouldn't have had a clue.
Right. Now, would you change anything, knowing everything you know now? Would you change anything if you were talking to Larry 2.5 years ago? What would you tell Larry?
I would tell him the importance of school. It's very important. You gotta. I think school, what it does is it teaches you how it should be. That doesn't mean like when you get on the job, that's how it is. But it teaches you the basics that you do need to know, some type of understanding, because you need that.
Now, people ask me pretty regularly, is Larry in IT? Like what type of job does he have now? If you could maybe just kind of describe the current role that you have now and again, the ideal role that you're still looking for.
So it's kind of a lower help desk type deal, but not really a help desk. And it's not like we're doing major tickets every day, like a help desk person would. But it's not that I can't. So yeah, my ideal role right now would be to start off as a SOC analyst or in forensics. But I feel if I got to be a SOC, if I'm just sitting there just monitoring 24 hours a day, just monitoring attacks and stuff like that and seeing what's good. And that kind of gives me I think it just get my brain going.
So what's really interesting is the guest that we're about to bring onto the show, his name is Doug Roberts, and he had a career in law enforcement where he was doing digital forensics. So he would literally, they would take, they'd get a warrant. And once they had a warrant, they could unlock someone's phone and basically pull all the photos, text messages, everything, that person's whole life is on that phone, right? And so, building a case, evidence, and there's some bad people out there, right? There's some people that really hurt others and just have bad intentions in the world and community. And so, being part of that in digital forensics, if it's law enforcement, there's a lot of opportunity out there. So what's interesting is our guest was actually in that world, and he's now, for the last year, he's really been looking for a full-time cyber job. So kind of like you, like trying to transition out of IT and getting into full cyber. Now, he did end up, getting a master's in cybersecurity and a lot of certifications and everything, but he's having a difficult time trying to land that full-time job. So I thought that would be kind of a perfect way to sort of end these podcasts, just to show that even someone like this gentleman who has now for the past 6 years been in IT,
Wow.
he still is having difficult time getting calls, and
It's crazy.
so we'll hear his story here in a minute. And I know you have to go, and you've been telling me you've been working a lot and studying, and that's like your life right now. So I won't hold you up, but I'll go ahead and bring on Doug, and then you can kind of listen into that conversation. Hi, Doug. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
Good.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And
So we actually started this podcast 2 years ago, January of 2020. I met him at a Bible study, and I was just kind of sharing about myself. I said, "Hey, I'm in cyber, because we're saying, hey, what's your name? What do you do for work?" And so after the Bible study came up to me, and he's like, "Hey, I really want to get into cybersecurity. It's my dream." And so I said, "Yeah, let's do it. I'll mentor you, and we'll record our conversations, and let's do a podcast." Now, what was funny is I'd never done a podcast at that point. I was just like, I just really intuitively knew that it would reach and connect with people who also were like him, that wanted to get into it. And I just felt like I had a lot of friends also that probably were in that same place. And by recording it and sharing it, that this might benefit a lot of people. I never would have guessed that 2 years later, we'd still be trying to get him employed. And that made me truly realize how hard this is. And that's why I wanted you to have on the show, because I think that you're in this similar spot, and it would kind of be an interesting way to kind of bookend the show, right? Opening and closing, we're still here. And even though it's not a glorious ending, it's just the reality of how difficult this is, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because I started from the first one. I've been trying to listen to it for the past week. So I think I'm like at 12. And everyone, I'm like, so did he get a job yet?
No. Yeah, I know. He's working, he's in IT at least. So at least he's got his foot in the door, which is, in my opinion, is always necessary. I don't really think you can go directly into cyber. I know that's controversial. Other people may have different opinions. The analogy I give people is like, look, when you go into the recruiter's office when you're 18 to join the military, they're not going to let you in special forces on day 2. Like, not even right out of boot camp. You just don't go into special forces. Like, you may really, really want to, but they just recognize in the military that you need a few years of actually, like, normal service and training, all that kind of build up to that. They just don't throw you right in. And I kind of feel that's the way this is really kind of turning out. You got to have a couple years in IT to really kind of understand, in my opinion, like the assets that you're protecting, knowledge of computers, how they work, to really secure them. It's an interesting conversation. I wanted to ask you, what initially drew you to wanting to get into cybersecurity? What was kind of the appeal?
It falls back on being a police officer. When I was a police officer, we had a lot of stuff come in where we're trying to collect evidence from cell phones and computers. When I started, I had kind of a flip phone. I had the more smartphone, so people started utilizing that more. So and I was only the tech savvy person in the PD,
right?
So like when I went in there, they were using VHS to record stuff. I switched that all over to DVD to make it easier to send stuff to the state's attorneys.
That's cool.
And then looking at like the photos that we would take, I created like a little database so you could type in the person's name. It was an Excel sheet. but it would pull up the picture. I was the techie of the department, so they sent me to some schools with the DEA and the FBI for electronic communication exploitation and stuff like that. And that was awesome, going to those classes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what got me into the forensic side of it. So like, again, with the cell phones, we had an awesome device that I could rip all the data, the text messages, photos off of that.
Right. Did it ever just shock you that, like, oh my gosh, this guy's just clearly saying, okay, go buy the drugs here, or I just shot someone over here? Was it just like always just surprising to you? Like,
their whole life is on the phone, and it's an open book once you get into it, or once you do your search warrant, at least.
Right.
So
yeah, it's interesting. I think it's an interesting conversation because so far, I think this is our 22nd episode, Doug, and I don't think we've really ever gotten really deep on the forensic side of it. And I think you may actually be our first guest that actually has some experience there. So I think it might be kind of interesting, especially for people that, they've heard Larry talk about, he wants to get into penetration testing because he thinks it's kind of fun and cool to hack and stuff. And it is, right? But there might be, how would you categorize, Doug, someone who is interested in learning more about digital forensics? How would they even kind of go about that? Should they go to a training course first?
I enjoy reading. So, that'd be my first go-to, would be to try to find a book on it. And there's tons of books on it. But like just working with programs like Autopsy, to look at hard drives and stuff like that. I mean, if that's something you want to do, you can make a little mini lab and do that.
Is that a commercial program they'd have to buy, or is there like a demo version or something they can get a hold of? Or how would you, because I love that you mentioned lab, Doug, because you've probably heard in our episode, I really feel like if someone's applying to a job, they should have a lab first, so that if you're talking to an employer and you have no prior experience, at least you can say, look, I haven't done that, but I built a lab. Because what that shows the employer is, wow, this person has initiative. They truly are interested in this. They spent their personal time kind of building this. So is it possible to do that in forensics as you're reading a book? Can you actually do like forensics? And if so, kind of what software, would you recommend they might kind of get into? I don't know if there's any open source stuff in forensics that
there is.
Yeah.
And I do believe that program has an open source, like a version of it. I mean, it's not going to have all the bits and pieces to it, but it would give you enough. Like when I was doing the master's degree, I would follow along in the book. Like I would read something like what they're doing, and then try to recreate it on my computer.
So I want to go through your experience a little bit. So you have some digital forensics, kind of background at this point in your career. What happens next? Like you decide to leave, and then what's the next position you hold after leaving the police force?
Well, as a police officer, I was trying to get I got the bachelor's, which was in intelligence studies, because I was thinking more of the route of like terrorism, spy stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's really interesting to me. But when I left and I moved out west, I looked at some agencies here, and policing's different in California.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
To the point where, I went home to my family and I'm like, I don't think I want to do this anymore.
Right.
They were supportive of that.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided, like, hey, what I really liked from law enforcement was that, the computer forensic stuff, just the computer stuff. I've always been a computer nerd.
Mm-hmm.
Why not focus on that? So that's when I started the master's degree.
Got it. Okay. So at this point, you had the bachelor's degree while you were a police officer, and then you moved to West Coast. You leave the police force, and then you are pursuing a Master of Science in Cybersecurity. You obtain that, right? So you have a master's degree in cybersecurity, which is quite impressive, right? And then what happened next in your journey?
So while getting the master's, I realized that, that was more of like policies, procedures, how to, set up companies to be safe for the defense in depth. Um, so I went in more of a hands-on thing. So I also got, while I was getting the master's, I also went and did a year to get an associate's in networking. Found
Perfect.
I really like networking.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. No, that's good.
So
Networking is so critical to cybersecurity because unless you have physical possession of a device, you're going to be either a blue team kind of defender across the network, or you're going to be, attacking from across the network, right? So networking is absolutely the fundamental ABCs of cybersecurity, right? So you loved that part of it. That's cool. So then
enjoyed it.
you got you got the master's first, and then you got the additional education in networking, which is awesome.
Got them together
Oh, at the same time. Okay.
at the same time.
And then what happened next after you got the associates?
Um, so while I was doing those, I found a part-time job at a school as the technology coordinator.
Okay.
Glorified keyboard cleaner, pretty much.
Okay, gotcha. But you got your foot in the door. Yeah.
I got my foot in the door, and that was pretty awesome for 6 months. And then an MSP came into the school district. It was going to take over the school, and like, hey, we need a service desk analyst to run these sites. Would you do that? So I went full time, with them, and I did that for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I went to another school district as the network administrator.
Okay. It's amazing how much experience you can get at a school district because you literally have all these hackers, right? As students that just want to hack, and you can't prosecute them. You can't really do much to them, right? So some of the best people I know in the IT industry came up through school districts because you had to harden the heck out of everything because these students, they just have free time. They're just going to try to hack, right? I'm not trying to overstate it. It's not like every student is a hacker, but there's certainly a percentage of very, very smart kids.
The funny story is, there was 3 high schools in this district, and one of the kids at one of the high schools, he noticed a security flaw in the network and reported it. So we actually kind of took him on as kind of like a part-time summer helper, and he's fishing around in the back office of one of the high schools, and he finds an old server. So he decides to plug it in to see what's on it and connects it to the network. And it's running DHCP on it.
Ooh. So all of a sudden, causing outage. Yeah, because
everything and all the sites are connected. So all of a sudden, just boom, 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 boom. That was fun to clean up.
So it's interesting. I guess it was a pretty flat network because if you have a routed IP network, on a far distant gateway, you have to literally point. Because DHCP is by nature a broadcast that occurs, and so normally it's bound to that particular network segment. So the router on that segment has to have a DHCP helper to point it at a particular IP. So on those remote networks, they would have been pointing at the new server, not the old one. So maybe there was a router configuration that also supported the broadcast being pointed to that old server IP as well. Is that kind of a okay? Yeah, I was just kind of going back to my networking days. I was thinking like, how could that have happened?
Yeah, it's a decommissioned one from before I got there, and they just never e-wasted it. And
interesting. Wow, that's crazy. That is so. Yeah, brought a network down unintentionally. He wasn't malicious about it.
Don't connect it to the network.
He was just fascinated. Yeah. That's very interesting. So, okay, so then you got a ton of experience over this time on networking, which is really cool. You were responsible for Cisco ASA security, firewalls, wireless networks, Ruckus and switches. So during this time, you're really understanding about security because you're actually having to secure these things as a network administrator, right? You don't have a default password on these things. You're doing and that's why I think to our earlier point of the conversation, if you want to get cybersecurity, IT first, because in IT, you're literally doing, you have security responsibilities, as a network administrator. It's just part of the job, even though it's not full-time. So I think the experience and kind of going the route you did is perfect to kind of segue over. And so I think maybe part of the conversation is how we present ourselves in a resume, in an interview, is really, really important, because if we highlight the aspects of our past that are not directly relevant to cyber, what's going to happen in the mind, I can just tell you as a manager, right? What's going to happen to me is I'm going to say, this person's not a fit. They're too skilled in these non-areas. So my feedback to you when I looked at your resume was, let's laser focus this thing to exactly what that manager is thinking about, because then it's going to go, oh, match. Okay, I feel good here. Let's talk, right? I think it's going to get your foot in the door more effectively. That's how I look at a resume. I literally, when I get resumes for, I just got one the other day, someone that's applying, to my company, if I in the first 45 seconds, if I don't see stuff that's matching what I'm looking for, I don't even look at it. The person sadly may have a ton of experience there, but I have too many to look through to take a gamble and book the time and everything, And so I really want to see someone where in the first boom, right away, they're just passionate about cyber. They love it. They're also, I look personally for people that are, really a joy to work with, that have great attitudes, that they're going to be a good team player, right? And so I think it's important in the objective statement to kind of show a little bit about your personality, because it's not just, in a good workplace, it's not just everything it's also, can I work with this person? Can I connect with them, right? So,
if you don't mind me asking, do you think is the cover letter worth putting in?
I love cover letters. I think what it does is it shows me this person took a little bit of extra time in saying why they want to work for my company and what skills they have that would actually help me. And it shows me so much more about this person. Because if I have, 10 applicants and one of them wrote the letter, and it allows me to see more of their personality. Because think about resumes, they're so fixed. It's like chronological or whatever. And it doesn't really kind of tell, okay, why did they apply all the, it's a little bit more of a backstory. It's a little bit more about them. I would say that 90% of the time, if the cover letter is written well, I'm going to call them and actually do a phone interview with them. I'm going to at least talk to them. If they took the time to write a nice cover letter, I'm going to do it. So for me personally, I love cover letters. I highly recommend them. Yeah. It takes more time because you should not do a generic cover letter, in my opinion. I would recommend, if you're going to do a cover letter, customize it for that particular company. Spend a little bit of time and say, hey, here's why I want to work for you. It's your mission statements, what you guys do. I've always, that's, if that's true, right? And you kind of, do that. I think those are really important. That's a great question. So, okay, so you're at the school district for a while, and then you become a technology manager, right? And as a technology manager, you're responsible for quite a bit, right?
So much.
You've overseen a major network security upgrade, right? $2 million worth of network equipment, firewalls and switches, mobile device management. So you're responsible for iOS devices, which is really kind of cool because you know how to secure those now. So now you have an MDM, a powerful MDM. Now you can really kind of lock those down and really kind of protect those things, right? Yeah. Firewall audits, kind of going through those. So firewall audits, you're making sure that, if there was a old internet facing rule pointing traffic to some server, if that server's been decommissioned, hey, let's close down those ports, let's close down those rules, right? Making sure the ACLs are all accurate, that they're still necessary, cleaning those things up, right? That's so important. Email security. So making sure, because, we talk about this a lot in this podcast. If a hacker is going to get into a network, 90% of the time, it's a phishing email is the initial way they can. It's just too easy, right? Anyone could write an email from anywhere in the world. and the chances that somebody's going to click on it is pretty high. We were just talking about the effectiveness of a cover letter. Think about that same amount of energy that a hacker puts into writing a very well-written phishing email. If you can do a little bit of research, Doug, on someone's LinkedIn profile, their social media, and you sort of impersonate their best friend or a family member saying, hey, look at this photo I just took of this vacation, right? The click rate is going to go through the roof if somebody does, and we call that a spear phishing, when it's an intentional, targeted, a lot of thought went into that. Man, people are going to open those attachments and click on those links, right?
They are.
Yeah. You were responsible for vulnerability management. So auditing servers, making sure that they're up to date with patches. Boy, that's tough, right? Keeping everything patched currently. It used to be that there was this real struggle. If I deploy this patch, what if it blue screens the server? What if it takes the network down, right? But if I don't patch, am I going to be vulnerable? Am I going to get hit? So you always had to kind of weigh this. And one of the considerations, right, was if I patch too soon, I don't want to be the first person to figure out this just bricked my network. If I wait too long, now there's this window of opportunity for hackers that might be using Shodan and other kind of internet facing things where you could literally just type something and go, okay, boom, here's all the IPs that are vulnerable to this particular issue or that have these ports open, right? And so, wow, tell me about that struggle of how did you find the balance of how soon to patch versus the risk of a patch hurting and breaking a server?
Right. As soon as we get notification of the patch is out, we do try to push it. I mean, we try to wait until the weekend, like a Friday night, so we have the weekend in case something like that happens. Because we do have monitoring so that we can see if the server goes down or not. But backups, I mean, just you gotta have your image backups.
Gotta have backups. Yeah, you find out how important a backup is oftentimes too late, right? Or you find out that that the backup didn't get enough data in order to make it actually valuable. I can't tell you the number of times calls and issues and people that didn't test their backups. Almost, gosh, it's a high percentage of the time. If you're not testing your backups to verify that they're actually working, it's like you're blindly running. I don't know the analogy here, but like imagine you've got this car, right? And you're about to go on this road trip across the country and you don't check the tire pressure. You don't check to see the last time this thing had an oil change. You don't do any sort of testing whatsoever. And you're just hoping that the thing just works. Well, okay, you break down, oh gosh, this thing just never got tested. So it's like you wouldn't do that in real life, right? But so many IT shops, and I have a theory. I'd like to hear your thoughts on why this doesn't happen. It's time. In order to actually test a backup, you need to dedicate a full day setting aside where you're not handling tickets or service requests and everything to create virtual machines in a network that replicates, okay, I've got a copy of my domain controller here, right? So, and that takes effort because you have to like take a sysvol backup to rebuild a DC or restore that from backup. The skill of restoring a server, and you mentioned DHCP and all the services and everything to get that thing running. Yeah. It takes time. It takes experience. It takes expertise. And if you can't make that backup network, that sort of DR environment, if you can't make that match production perfectly, if just a few things are off, then when you get into a real world situation, it didn't match production perfectly. So then your procedures, that you're trying to follow aren't there, right? And so, this is all these things are relevant to cybersecurity because these are things that hackers exploit. They exploit the fact that, okay, if I delete your backup and I deploy ransomware, how are you going to restore your network after a ransomware attack? So now you have to take a backup of your backup. You have to get like 3 copies, right? Like one cloud backup, one offline backup. And in order to really prepare for ransomware, you gotta think through the way a hacker looks at it, right? I've heard stories of hackers that tamper with backups for months so that they've literally waited until your things came back. So now their code is there. So when you go to restore, boom, they're still in there. right?
Heard of that. Yeah.
And that actually gets back into forensics. You have to, in order to do
Right.
proper, you have to do the forensics to know, okay, we've evicted for the hacker. Now it's time to do the restore. Otherwise, if you do the restore too soon and the hacker's still in there, you just wasted a full day or two doing restores because you haven't evicted the hacker. So the forensics is so critical after detecting an attack. Don't start your restores until you can have some level of confidence with forensics. Forensics is what gives you the confidence that the hacker's not still in the network, right?
If I remember, remember Matson shipping containers? They had that huge hack. And I think that was what they did is they restored everything. And they had been in there for months.
Yeah.
And when they brought it back up, boop, right back in again.
Right back in. Yeah. Yeah. They just got owned hard. Yeah. And that's, so how do you make sure that your backups are not tampered with? How do you make sure that the hacker hasn't been in there for a very, very long time? That's tough. Hackers, initially when they, their initial access, they're not trying to have all the alarms and things go off, right? They're trying to be pretty stealthy. So that can be pretty difficult to detect. I think, go ahead.
Just recently went through a security audit for the whole organization because we're trying to get cybersecurity insurance. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but companies have that. That's insures them for millions of dollars, but you need to have a bunch of check marks. You need to have your EDRs, your endpoint on all your systems. You need to make sure that you have secure firewalls or maybe multiple firewalls for that defense in depth. So just going through that, there's a lot of stuff that they pointed out that some stuff we were missing. I'm like, I didn't realize that.
So one tip I'd give to you and also all the listeners is do not store anything related to your cybersecurity insurance policy on your network whatsoever, because what often happens is the really top hacking groups that get access to your network, one of the first things they're going to search for keywords like insurance and stuff. They're going to get a copy of your policy and go, oh, they're insured for $2 million. Guess how much do you think the ransom demand is going to be? It's going to be exactly what your insurance payment is. Too much, they know you're not going to pay. And too little, they're not going to get the most of what they could. And so keeping that offline can actually give you some additional, leverage in that kind of a situation. So we talk about oftentimes in cybersecurity this concept of assume breach. Assuming that you've been breached and having that mindset allows you to take a mindset of hunting for the hacker who's already in the network. And, if we have that mindset, okay, let's assume that this folder of where I have my cybersecurity insurance policies, it's going to be opened. And so then this little tip here, you can drop these little canary tokens in that folder. So when someone opens the document, you get an email. So these are, there's a free service out there that generates these little tokens, and you could kind of just sprinkle them across the network in folders where no one should be opening up certain documents. You can give the document a file name like do not open, this is the salary history of everyone, or this is our passwords. As soon as that document gets open, boom, you've got a hacker in the network. It alerts you to someone's presence, right? So that's a really interesting answer to the question, if we have that assume breach mindset and we're hunting for someone in the network, how can we get that early detection? It's really when someone's behavior changes, it's these actions that don't align to normal patterns. And there's a lot of technology out there that can kind of help with that, but I think those canary tokens are kind of fun to put everywhere, and that's always an interesting conversation. So you've had some additional experience in two-factor authentication. I think that's really important. You've had some experience setting up single sign-on. Single sign-on is really valuable because if you have 100 different applications and somebody leaves your organization, you disable their Active Directory account, and now all those applications are now disabled as well because they all pointed to that. probably works against you in some cases too. If a hacker gets an account now, they can, access all those apps. But the value of single sign-on when pointing it to an identity provider such as Azure Active Directory, hopefully no one's using ADFS because it's a little outdated, but say Azure Active Directory, you can then more easily add a two-factor authentication solution onto it. And that allows you to secure access to the identity. Identity is the new security perimeter in this world of software as a service. So 10 years ago, if you had firewalls, that was sufficient oftentimes as a perimeter to try to protect your internal applications. Now that the cloud is out there and all it takes is a username and password to sign into any kind of internet-facing cloud service, your firewall is not going to help you in those cases, right? So you having your skill of having SSO pointing to an identity provider where you can then layer on two-factor authentication, I think is a really critical, great experience that you have there too. If there's any employers listening to this, Doug, any additional kind of experience that you have that you want to maybe highlight that you think might really kind of be valuable for someone who's looking for a full-time, and that's kind of what I think what we should probably have you share is what is the ideal kind of full-time cybersecurity role that you're looking for any kind of employers that are listening?
I like the job description for like the SOC analyst. Just seeing the threat feeds come in, and I think with the analysis background I have from that bachelor's, I think that would fit there. But for 14 years, I had to document everything, as a police officer. So pretty good at writing a report, I think by now. So I just think it's neat to be able to respond real time, see something come in, and then put a block in. So
yeah. And do you have, what kind of like SIM experience do you have? I'm assuming on the networking side, you probably configured some devices to kind of point to a centralized logging location, but any particular vendor that you've had some experience with?
I've worked with quite a few. Right now, I mean, we have Meraki, but like I've been playing around with Splunk, just the free stuff, and I've gone through some of the classes that they have online.
Nice, perfect. Okay, so if you're an employer listening to this, Doug has some Splunk experience, and he's also configured it on the networking side there. But more importantly, his interest in initially is full-time kind of SOC analyst role. So next kind of as we're kind of wrapping up here, Doug, very, very curious, any thoughts on how did we get to where we are today, where allegedly there's 3 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs out there, right?
Yeah.
And how can someone with a master's, right, in cybersecurity, with all the experience you have in forensics and networking, all this kind of stuff, why do you think it's so difficult? What's been your experience? What's your opinion on what's going on here with employment and what's going on?
I mean, I've been focusing on trying to get a job for the past year now in security. And so, I got the Security Plus, I got the CYSA, the security analyst.
Yeah.
I have the CCNA. And I'm currently working on the CISP.
Yeah.
That Certified Information System Security Professional.
Yep.
So recently I was at the RSA conference up in San Francisco. And I've read 3 of the CISP books already. I should probably just go take the test.
Yeah.
But I figured, what, they're doing a 2-day boot camp up there. I want to go to the conference anyways, so I'll go do the boot camp. And walking into that room, it was a little overwhelming because pretty much everybody there is either a CIO or a CISO, trying to get that for the organization. So I talked to some of them and I explained like what I was trying to do. And they're like, on paper, you're overqualified for these entry jobs you're applying for. That's what they're telling me. My problem is because I've gotten all this education, all these certifications, but I've never had a job specifically for that, and that might be my downfall.
So that's where I think changing that conversation with that, say in that interview, is you actually do have the experience, like in deploying 2FA and in hardening Cisco ASA firewalls, and that's exactly why when I went through your resume, I kind of brought that out and kind of focused and highlighted those things, because the truth is you do have the experience and you have been doing it, and it's just really more of, I think, stating it like, hey, I've been doing this, like 50% of my capability responsibilities is really cybersecurity. I'm just looking for a role where I can do this really full time. And because of my background and my interests and my personality and focus, I would love to be able to do this kind of SOC analyst role. From an employer's perspective, I kind of see what they're saying. I think when somebody says overqualified, and this is not just for you, Doug, but for really anyone listening, essentially what the fear is as a manager, this person is not going to be in this role very long. They're going to try to take my job. They're going to try to, go somewhere else. And what a manager is really looking for is to avoid the headache of having to go through this interview process again in 6 months or a year, because it takes up so much time. So trying to find someone who's going to be a good long-term fit for this. So you can kind of get ahead of that and saying, look, I do have a lot of experience, all this kind of stuff. It's only because I'm finding that that's what's kind of necessary to get into this thing. But I will commit to you, right? And I think there is some value in committing to somebody that if you can give me a shot here, I will do this for at least a year and a half, 2 years. You have my word on that, right? That's gonna get ahead of that sort of concern that some people might have of that. And for what it's worth, I think that might be the psychology of what's going on behind that, and how you can maybe address that is giving someone like, hey, I will give this a shot for a couple of years. It's just, I just want to do this. I just love this. When you love something, you should just keep going no matter, and it's going to be worth it. I think, my dad always told me, hey, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, and I think this is worth it,
Yeah.
So any final thoughts, anything else, Doug, you wanted to chat about?
Because you are a business owner, and a manager, what do you think would be the ideal certification? I guess.
Yeah. So,
like,
when
you
it
see it
comes
on paper, and that's like the best one.
Yeah. So the the GIAC kind of stuff for SOC analysts, I would say that, that's probably the best you could do in terms of that. The CISSP is clearly the top cert, just general cybersecurity. So that's really, really solid, for sure. And it's impressive that you've already read those books like 3 times. So when I took the CISSP back in 2004, it was just, there was like one book back then. It was this thick. I read it twice. I took the test and I got really lucky and passed the first time. And so I think if you've already kind of read, those things like 3 times, I think you're ready. I think you should just go take it. Do you actually have the ability to create a DMZ, either in your home network or work network, or even in a like Azure, where you can actually get a kind of a honeypot that's internet facing, and then feed that into Splunk and start kind of looking at the alerts and alarms and that kind of thing? Have you already built something like that?
Yeah. So here at the company, I created a DMZ for some services, that I could spool up a VM from a server. But also at home, I got a 19U rack with 2 servers and firewalls, all kinds of stuff. So I can create that at home too.
Yeah, that might be kind of interesting, is like, put something out there, put the Splunk agent, like you mentioned, there's a free kind of Splunk agent, put that on there, and then purposefully, like, don't bring it up to the latest patch levels. See how long it lasts. I
Yeah.
did that once. When do you remember the WannaCry worm?
Mhm. Yep.
So just for fun, I created a virtual machine, up in Azure, and didn't have the patch, and left the server message block, the SMP protocol, open. And I think it was like 5 minutes, the thing got hit with ransomware. It was so quick. But then it was kind of cool to go back forensically and kind of look at, okay, how did the dropper come in? What did it do to the registry? What persistence, kind of things, just kind of learning, that was kind of fascinating. But I think getting some reps on that, and purposefully kind of, doing that you can deploy like Sysmon. Sysmon is a free tool to really observe what's going on the endpoint. Another one would be like Snort, is a host-based intrusion detection agent,
Yeah.
and then maybe kind of feeding those things in to Splunk would be cool. Well, hey, please keep in touch, Doug, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm really hoping, that someone listening will reach out to you. Would you like me to? I can link your LinkedIn on there so someone can get a hold of you if you like.
That'd be great. I appreciate that.
Okay, perfect.
It's the YouTube channel that we call.
Yeah. So the YouTube channel, if you search for Cybersecurity 101 with Joe and Larry, right now we have one video out there, and it's me kind of showing him how to set up an Active Directory domain controller, and then showing him how to create new users and offboard users. So the last interview he had, he didn't get the job because he didn't have experience onboarding or offboarding users.
Completely.
And so I said, okay, well, let's do this. Let's create a video of me showing you how to do that. And so, it's about an hour-long video, and we actually create a virtual machine, install AD, and then I show him how to create users. And then we create an Office 365 tenant, and we create users there too, so he can have both the cloud and the on-prem kind of experience doing that. So we're gonna transition to YouTube, because that way people can see more hands-on of how these things are done. Whereas the audio is kind of cool, it's kind of talking, but it's not getting the job done for Larry. My goal is to get Larry, in, and as his mentor, I'm committed however long it takes, right? So, we're gonna switch over to YouTube.
Awesome. All right, I'll start watching it.
Awesome. Well, Doug, very nice to meet you. Good luck, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. See ya. Bye. To all the listeners over the last 2.5 years, hundreds of thousands of people, countries all over the world, top 100 podcasts in India and Russia, and just international audience.
First, it's amazing. First, we just like to thank God for that, and thank God for all our listeners. Wow, I didn't know it was that many. Joe showed me the number, so I'm like, what? But thank you guys for just listening to our podcast. Hopefully, it helped someone out. I've got a few people that wrote me, well, not a few, a couple of hundred people that wrote me on LinkedIn, and then how it helped them out. So yeah, that's all this is for. It's kind of Joe's helping me out, and we're trying to help out a few other people in the, in the whole scheme of things. And we, with the YouTube channel, that was kind of, with our YouTube channel now, that's the kind of the ideal to continue to help people really get into the field.
That's good stuff. We're going to keep going. We're just going to enjoy one day at a time, just, growing together, learning together. And, God always provides, and, we'll just keep charging forward, brother. So, all right. Well, we'll see everyone over on YouTube.
See you on YouTube.